All right, so let me tell you about what those systems essentially are supposed to be doing. So essentially, well, I'll start here. This is a major issue. Okay, this causes a problem. These hackers built this stuff. The government has pretty much acquired it. They redevelop it under parameters that exist so that it could be a preventative from hacking system. And so essentially there's different uses of it. Essentially, this is religion blog. It has a theoretical exploit pop-up of a zero time that will always exist. And so with that, that becomes nowadays a window pop-up that can be repurposed and fills in the exploit in its theoretical system. So essentially, what that is like, see, in semantics, separation of church and state kind of stuff, that affects it a lot. So essentially, there's a way to utilize it for essentially prep school, and most of those have some sort of chapel in them, and it can potentially become like a Department of Education like tracking system and proctoring system to make sure that people aren't cheating. And that then it's supposed to have potentials for like building, well, the, well, in Washington State, they have a yellow card, the Amish people, and that essentially that money is what they want to use for their own schooling. Potentially that could be built into, I've already made a demonstration on this, it could potentially be built into a government built with education system that brings them up to 8th grade, and that essentially, or whatever that expectation is nowadays for schooling, and that then it can be a tracking system, and then potentially teachers in the public school can sit there as the testing proctors for the official stuff. And that then, with that, comes the ability that that pop-up could then be put on their computers out at their compounds, and then it can be preventing people from exploiting them and stuff like that, because they don't necessarily have computer scientists helping them with any of that type of stuff, okay? And so then that would be utilizing their tax dollars for school, and that then it builds a acceptable tracking system and for the like Hooterites and the people like that. Okay? So essentially it has a similar ability for prep schools to prevent them from being exploited also. But that in this theoretical semantic of this, they gotta have some sort of chapel of some sort, basically. And so then it could also be used for like Ivy League, and they usually have a theoretical chapel like Oxford and Cambridge on their Ivy League school. And so these can fix the AIs even at major Ivy Leagues. And essentially that is the theoretical development for that. And then it fills in, and then it semantically fits into what is the morality religion block. And so that's how to think about that. So then this one can be boilerplate, Pentagon, military style, generic school system, and that it could be built in what is like a, it can be built in a more advanced way, in a generic advanced way. And that my vision for this was similar to this, which is essentially to have a whole structured K through 12, every single class, every single lecture, every single piece of paperwork, every single like lesson plans, 180-day school days, all that stuff, all in one AI, so that a school, if they're like impoverished, can merely like essentially they could potentially like utilize an internal style YouTube or something in it to be basically teaching whole classes that if they lack funding or something, they can have all the homework printouts, they can have all the stuff, and then the teacher can put their special flavor if they want to change something. And then having all the tracking, having all the grading, having everything basically being very generic, and then that being something that every school can use, and that it could be out of the Department of Education, and that theoretically there's some zero time exploits that this stuff can fill, basically, and that then that's essentially where then the schools would basically be able to minimize people hacking into their school stuff, into the public schools. And so this is kind of what I talked about with the DoD military. This would be your weapons contractors and stuff like that, and whatever that means. That'll be kind of different of a development, but essentially it'll be somewhat of just a filling of their exploits system. And so then this is what I was talking about. Oh yeah, that's the other thing. See, theoretically, this is like government econ kind of stuff, okay? This would be like all of your non-military subcontracts. This would be all your military subcontracts. Then here is there exists a theoretical Interior Bureau of Land Management that doesn't necessarily fit into that. That essentially this could also be potentially semantically acceptable as God's great country or God's great land. And then potentially a separate system. These would be more of your baseline Pentagon structured corporation that wouldn't necessarily work for potentials for the need for rangers and park rangers and stuff like that. That wouldn't necessarily be an economic subcontractor, but would probably fall more in line of needing something like that based on not being part of a mill net out there in the sticks, okay? When they're on, they don't have charter, they don't have hardline, they have really shitty sat internet and shit, okay? And so this could potentially be a fix because these also boost, these also can run through sat internet, basically, and that then it can build a, you know, like the Ranger out there. Essentially, they'll have a computer with with a hotspot, and so that stuff. These systems have the ability of pumping or maximizing the data flow and also creating a cybersecurity for that data stream, and that would be something potential for that type of stuff, right? So then this system is essentially meant to make NHS or the gold, silver, bronze kind of stuff, basically. And that then it's meant to just make it be a structure and then to be a broad-based, like, theoretical price quote, and then for insurance companies to choose which one would be optimized to be profitable, and then that being where then the insurance companies essentially they'll have some idea. Some will be profitable at silver or gold or bronze or whatever, or copper or whatever, and that then they could bid for those levels around some sort of theoretical internal, like dictating down to them, it costs this, and then having them bid for those to be the insurance companies for those levels, right? And then that being like where then it pushes away from NHS And then it becomes a structured, very easy thing for these insurance companies to understand, making it nationwide, basically. And then them getting to basically be the insurance company for bronze for that year, whatever arbitrary timeline, okay? Basically. And so then, see, that's good. That's good. Because then it pushes away from NHS, and then whiny little insurance companies can have their Obamacare back, basically. And then this is meant for police, courts, from the leasty, like theoretical Belgrade, all the way up to the Supreme Court, for a massive internal oversight system with trackings and anomalies and all of that. Bias, yeah, having analysis at bias and stuff like that. And then being a theoretical system that has an investigatory, yeah, oh yeah, deep hacking, okay? And then has all the tools that are outside of having to do that other stuff. It includes the potentials for people who have the speakers. It includes church people, rich people, and that theoretically there's a sound security that can be built also for all of this problem. And then this system is meant that if you have the pedo bangs or something, it's meant to just prevent that stuff from ever being on the screen, okay? The government's allowed to prevent hacking, and that they're not allowed to house that stuff, but they're allowed to keep outside hackers from pushing that stuff on your screen. And that is the theoretical, semantic, lawful way they are allowed to prevent the pop-up blackmails on everybody's screen. They're not allowed to have them flowing into a system and to be housing them. Okay? Basically. And so if you have that issue, the theoretical development of this is meant to merely keep that stuff from ever making it in to this. Basically. And so this is what I want you people to realize. That when it comes to the government and stuff, this system will not work with this AI. Right? This AI is a Russian Nazi style AI. It is. This system is a Pentagon built version. Right? Always has been. These are configured in ways that are, see, the Pentagon can't get Russian contracts. You people can. Okay? You guys have some Asian dark web AI. Basically. Even if it's highly built, it's essentially the whatever the architecture is of it. And if you guys were spreading this shit out to everybody in the church, college world and shit, none of those will be able to utilize this idea. Basically.